Hey everybody, welcome back to Electric Cafe. So this video is an album review on Fiction Factory's second and last album called Another Story. This is the first time the Fiction Factory is being featured on my channel. Unfortunately, they only had two albums, and this is their second one. They were a Scottish band, Scottish synth band. Had a little bit of success with one of their debut singles, "Feels Like Heaven," which I'm a huge fan of. I have the 7-inch, and I've always been a huge fan of that song. And it's what made me really kind of delve into their two albums, and I enjoy their their two albums. They have a nice kind of charm to it. They kind of balance a sort of a little bit of dance music and a little bit of synth pop in there. They are a little bit funky, and they have a good sound to them. I almost kind of compare them to like Frankie Goes to Hollywood, or and not maybe Kajagoogoo, or maybe even sort of like maybe a 1982, 83, 84 kind of an Ultravox kind of sound. Um, they have a mix of style for sure. Sometimes they have a little bit of sort of hit beats for the time, a touch of various influences. There's a song in here that sort of sounds a little bit reggae, um, pop in here, a little bit of funk in here. My favorite songs on the album are the brilliant dream pop sound of "Time Is Right." If you like dream pop and you're looking for like an '80s version of dream pop, check out "Time Is Right." That's such a brilliant song. It's so catchy, so perfect. And then you have the very smooth "Lose Your Heart in Nature," which I really like. And then the "Not the Only One" and "No Time" are really catchy. His vocal range is really unique. He has a really good voice, and and he can go in the high range too, and do really well singing there. And he has surprisingly some really good soul in his voice. He's an underrated singer. I feel like his voice is a little low in the mix here in this album at times. Um, the songs have some good rhythms on them, like "Not the Only One" and "Lose Your Heart in Nature." When I look at the songs individually, "Another Story" is kind of an instrumental opener. I got 1 3/4 stars. "Standing on the Top of the World," which was a single, I give it 2 1/4 stars. "Not the Only One," which was also a single, I like that one even better, 2 3/4 stars. All for One" is probably my least liked track. "All for You" um, is probably my least liked song on here. I give it 1 1/2 stars. Um, "Lose Your Heart," the second half of the album, actually, I like better than the first half. Kind of starts with "Lose Your Heart in the Nature" because I mean, well, I guess that's still on the first half of the album, but so I guess that kind of balances out because this is one of my favorite tracks on the album. 3 1/4 stars. That one's for "Lose Your Heart in Nature," my second favorite song on the album. "No Time," which was also a single, 2 1/4 stars. "The Powder Room," yeah, it's 1 3/4 stars. "Make Believe" is a little bit better, 2 1/2 stars. And "Time Is Right," oh man, I was really close to giving it 4 stars. You know, I've always loved that track, and when I played it last night when I was rating this, I played it for an hour straight. It's so close to 4 stars. I don't feel like it has like from a catchiness perspective, from a personal standpoint. I want to give it 4 stars, but from a merits point, from a I feel like I'm being a little bit biased towards it if I gave it 4 stars, so I kind of settled on 3 3/4 stars. And I couldn't really say it's a great song. It's not like I don't think you would go to it and be like, "Oh, this is a great song." But as far as like my personal like my my love of loving underground songs, like I want to give it 4 stars. Like I always I when it comes to me, like with music and sports and rooting for people, and like I always love the underground story. if it's somebody like fighting against the odds and and David versus Goliath, or just in sports in general, I always root if I have no rooting interest. I always root for the underdogs. I always like it to be competitive, and because if you root for the favorites and they just win, then how fun is that, right? It's like I like rooting for the underdogs and being different, and that's always been a theme of me liking the music that I've liked. It's not because I also like it, but it's because it's different and because I like to be unique, and I do enjoy that being thought of as unique and different, it's always been like that because I felt like I've always kind of been into the underground sound of whatever style it was, or the underground of whatever it is, especially when it comes to like art. Like I always like the more avant-garde stuff than your mainstream stuff. I mean, I have Salvador Dali up there. I mean, what's more avant-garde and underdog than what Salvador Dali's artwork represents, right? Um, so yeah, Fiction Factory is that for me in a way. And when it comes to synth pop, just very underrated. I've never heard anybody mention Fiction Factory as a good synth pop, and I think they're warranted. They had really good two albums. And then the last track, Victorious, 2 3/4 stars, almost very good, really close. As far as the opportunities for the album, a couple better tracks, some below average tracks on here, which is a pity because they have talent. I feel like maybe they kind of rushed this album being made because there's some good songs on here, and then there's some songs where you're just like, I guess maybe they ran out of ideas. Like, All For You doesn't really do anything for me, and really the Powder Room is kind of a rush song. Another Story is an instrumental song. Standing on Top of the World was a single, but I think it's kind of a weaker single for them. So, I feel like they're close, to making a really strong album, but they are a little far from it also. I give 24 and a half stars divided by 10 is a 2.45, which is around a 60, a 58, 59. I gave him a couple extra points. I gave it a 62 out of 100. I think it's on the low side. It's a good album. When I think of the overall, it's an album that shows some glimpses of charm and talent, but perhaps at a crossroads of the industry of new wave and maybe the end of new wave and sort of a lack of a bigger picture or direction probably for themselves. Perhaps they were sort of torn from the inside by the band themselves, considering this is their last album. So maybe they were at some conflicts, internally that sort of prevented this album from being a little bit better and a little bit better direction. But you do get a feeling with this album what could have been while still enjoying some songs here and there. And I think that's the biggest takeaway for me is that you do get a feeling with Fiction Factory, like what could have been, like even on the albums themselves, what could have been, and then you know it's just really part of the sound was very, and that's kind of what I was saying about sort of surviving the '80s in some way. Like there's a charm and a naiveness and a catchiness and a rawness about new wave music that it was very 1980, 81 to like 1985, 86. By the time the later 80s came on, new wave was sort of going away, and it was either kind of became, even freestyle music was sort of really popular around 86, 87, but sort of also kind of going away, and dance music was becoming, was it, were you electro, were you more forward thinking like techno, like were you into house music? Like, what were you going to do if you were new wave? Were you going to go more alternative rock? Were you going to go more Tears for Fears route and just become an alternative rock band or just an indie band? What were you going to do if you were new wave? Which direction were you going to take it? And I think that's what's great about the new wave music in that period is you could have just had a keyboard and a beat machine, or maybe just a keyboard and a rhythm maker of some sort, and one guy singing, and you have a band. You know, maybe there was, you know, you add somebody who's playing real bass, so you have the appearance of band. You think of like Spandau Ballet or something like that. You know, you have a lead singer, so okay, we got a drummer, you know, but you don't necessarily really had to have drummer in some respect. You know, it's like, but what direction were you going to take, and how were you going to evolve your sound to really meet the standards and the desires of the label, you know, some of these popular labels, and still being hip and still being on the cusp of what's going on and still being able to sell albums, but just a really difficult time to survive out of the 80s. And that's kind of why a lot of genres fail. When you think of like grunge music through the 90s, like why did grunge fail? I don't know. I'm not an expert on grunge. I'm not an expert on rock music, but I just told you the examples of how it was hard to survive in new wave music. You know, I would think that that has validity in a lot of different styles when it becomes popular. Is how do you survive, um, and still sort of be one of those bands that was there, but sort of survive what you want to do creatively, what the music trends are telling you, and then what your label is telling you, and what the fans are telling you, and where it's going, right? So it's, but then staying true to your of what kind of music you want to write, right? That's why a lot of bands didn't survive their first couple albums of what they were trying to do in their band. And you know, I think it's human nature to try to evolve what you're doing, right? And feel that what you're doing is getting better and getting different, and you're not really doing the same thing that you are. In some respect, you almost kind of wish that they kind of did, because at least if you like new wave and you like their sound, and they stayed making the same songs and similar songs with the same equipment that you liked, whoa, well, at least I like their stuff still 40 years later. You know, at least I can go back and enjoy more of the same, you know. But it's just interesting times. I think if there's anything that we've learned when it comes to the cult, being having a cult following and having a diehard uh, following of your music, is as you sort of create that for yourself. And I do, I wouldn't say educate, but I do um, I wouldn't say recommend. I'm trying to think of the word. I mean, I'm not saying educate either. I give my opinion to a lot of artists on how to grow their their brand, and grow their sound, and grow their, or just, I'm an advocate of it. Let's put it that way. I've always been an advocate of, and I feel like I've seen a lot of bands go through that, and I feel like I can lend a bit of advice to bands in how to create more of long, um, a long growth of their band and their sound and their popularity, versus, you know, making a one hit wonder and going away, or making an album like sort of like this is what you can do to sort of have um, a longer career, because you see all the I just talked about in my last video with the Fix. The Fix really don't have a an image, right? They don't really have any symbolism for their band, right? They don't really have any iconic cover albums. They really didn't push their image, even though I'm not a fan of pushing their visual image, like their appearance, right? Really, so the Fix have really like no image, right? And because of that, looking back, they really didn't build a cult following like they probably could have, like of other bands did. And and I guess that's the opportunity that you kind of look at big picture 40 years ago with a lot of these new wave bands. You think of somebody who did a great job of that, like The Cure, even New Order through anonymity, right, with their albums. Depeche Mode did a great job of that, right? Susie and the Banshees did a good job. There's a lot of bands that visually did a good job of making an image of themselves, even if it was a lack of image, that that were able to keep them through the trends. You know, keep them popular and keep them a well respected. Plus their talent, of course, you know, but also it helped that, right? Like it helped them get through those times and trends of music change. But yeah, just my thoughts on overall, you know. But again, going back to the Fiction Factory album, another story. I think it's a really good album. I gave it a 62 out of 100. But there's definitely a charm in here and there's some charm and talent in here for sure. But you do get the feeling of like a what could have been. But if you have like a nostalgia for underground 80s good bands, Fiction Factory is one of those for myself. I just wish they had more material, you know, that I could have enjoyed over the last 30 so years. But I've always had a soft spot for Fiction Factory, you know, just one of those Scottish bands that a lot of people don't think of when you think of like 80s synth pop. But I think they have a lot of catchy material in here and a lot more good material than probably people give them benefit of the doubt for. But if you like, you know, early 80s synth pop music, new wave, you know, then check them out. I think you'll be pleasantly surprised by them. They're kind of in that Kaja Gugu, Bronski beat, you know, maybe Frankie Goes to Hollywood, Ultravox, Skritty Blitty, you know, sort of in that style of early, you know, maybe even Nick Haywood or wouldn't say Howard Jones, but um, maybe Thompson Twins. You know, sort of in that style, maybe. I don't know. It's in that synth pop style. Haircut 100, Nick Haywood. I don't know, sort of in that style, I suppose. But yeah, that's my thoughts on Fiction Factory. Curious if you have any favorite songs by Victory Faction. It'd be nice to hear a good thing about the band from somebody out there that likes them. All right, thanks so much for watching.